Hey guys, Cameron with CBM Reviews here, and I wanted to talk about Magneto. So if you already saw the thumbnail, you know what I'm going to be talking about. So there's no easy way to tiptoe around it. I'm about to make the case that the MCU X-Men should cast a black Magneto. If you really think that without listening to my argument that my point is stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm just trying to bait or whatever like that, then you can go ahead and click off it. If you want to thumbs down it without listening to me, that's your prerogative. But if you're interested in what points I have to make, stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Before I get into this little discussion, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking around this long. Apparently you're interested in the points that I have to make. If you're interested in this sort of thing, or maybe even comic book movie reviews, television reviews, that sort of thing, click that subscribe button. And if you want to know as soon as I upload, hit that notification bell. You'll know every single time I post a video. Essentially, the point that I have to make is that I think that Magneto in the MCU should be cast by a person of color, specifically a black person, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. Traditionally, in X-Men lore, Magneto has been Jewish, and this has been in the comic books, cartoons, and movies. In all those mediums, him being Jewish makes perfect sense. Back in the comics, when X-Men came out in 1963, he was a Jewish adult whenever the Holocaust happened in the early 40s. At that point, he and his wife Magda escaped because of fear of the German rule, and in the 60s, he was Magneto and he had adult children. That's how we know that he was an adult when it happened. So it made sense for him to have this feeling of oppression where people will hate you for something that is completely nonsensical. In this case, Germans hated Jews for no good reason whatsoever, and so he knew how humanity's hate ran. Fast forward to 2000 and we have Magneto played by Ian McKellen. And in this case, instead of being an adult during this time, he was a child, which made sense because this is a little bit of a longer time period in between, but it still made sense. So now we are in 2019 and Kevin Feige has stated that he doesn't want to include the X-Men in their standalone movie for the next 5 years because they've gotten the next 5 years planned out. So 2024, it doesn't make sense to have Magneto of Jewish descent if we're trying to include the Holocaust. The reason being is that if we do the math, it will be 80 years between when the Holocaust happened and when the movie would come out. If we are talking about Magneto being a child whenever this happens, that still puts him at an age of about 93 because his powers still manifest while he's there. And I don't think that it makes sense logistically to have your big bad be a nonagenarian. And number two, I don't think it makes sense from a casting standpoint because chances are you're probably going to want to use the character again, and casting somebody in their 80s or 90s is somewhat of a risk because you have the possibility of needing to recast due to natural causes. So what do? We tweak the origin story of Magneto. First and foremost, you have to understand that Magneto comes from a point of tragedy. He grew up in a place where he was discriminated against, where he was hated because of who he was. It wasn't a good reason at all. And then when his powers manifested, and now humanity is hating mutants for just simply existing, he knows how deep that hate runs. He knows what humans are capable of, what they will do if they have a deep-seated hatred or fear of you, and he doesn't want that to happen. But since we can't use the Holocaust as the setting because of the time span, we can shorten the time span by making a different era. In this case, the Civil Rights Movement. During the Civil Rights Movement, black people had to fight for basic human rights that other people had in the country, specifically white people. And they were absolutely beaten on, humiliated, dog-sicked on them just for trying to be on an equal playing field as their white counterparts. Now, if we take Magneto from the 40s and move him to the 60s, have his powers manifest, maybe during a peaceful protest where the police get involved, and just like in the movies where he kind of watched his parents being led to die, he can see a tragedy stemming firsthand in this case as well. Because it happens in the 60s, we have a 20-year gap, and so instead of it being a nonagenarian, we can have it be somebody in their late 60s, maybe 70s. We could even get away with mid-60s, to be completely honest, and therein lies a little bit of time that we bought ourselves by tweaking the origin story just a little bit. And I understand there's something to be said about sticking true to the source material. I absolutely love the MCU because they do everything that they can, everything possible, to stick with the source material. I just feel that because of the time span, this isn't exactly viable. Yes, they were able to do it with Captain America because instead of him being frozen in the ice for, say, 20 years, they extended it to 70 years, and that's why Captain America worked in this current timeline, but we don't really have that kind of plot device to kind of just stretch time a bit. Maybe they can invent some sort of plot device to make that work, and if they do, absolutely, make Magneto original origin story ring true. But if we're not going to be using any kind of time extension or time suspension, anything like that, then I think that it makes sense to have a Magneto come from this origin story. Plus, it actually does build on the lore because Professor X and Magneto were, in a way, based on Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And so that would be more of a direct nod to the creation, not necessarily the character, but it still works. As far as who I cast on it, I do have that video coming up next month, so don't worry, I'm not trying to cast him right now. But if you wanted to see my X-Men casting, you can click right here. And if you want to cast your own X-Men, you have a possibility of winning a copy of Uncanny X-Men 132. Yes, this is real, if you have the best casting choices in the comment section of that video. I understand that if you want to keep Magneto true to his origin story, I get it. It would be fine with me too. I just think that it makes the most logical sense to just tweak things a little bit so that it works in the real world. If you agree with me, that's perfectly fine. I'm glad that you see my points. If you don't agree with me, that's fine too. I'm glad that you stuck around to listen to my points, and you can kind of give some counterpoints in the comment section below. I'm perfectly open to some civil dialogue in the comment section, and I'll be more than happy to respond. But I just felt like, even though this was a sensitive subject in a way, that it's something that we could talk about, something that we could discuss, especially with the current state that our country is in. It would really make a whole lot of sense to have our character go through these sorts of things, just like it made sense for Magneto to be Jewish in the 60s and having gone through those atrocities back then. But as I said, that's just my opinion. I would love to hear yours. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Share this with your friends, and as always, this is Cameron with CPM Reviews. We'll see you next time.